ground-based weapons and defense systems ready to punch through. And it's not just weapons, it's so-called contested logistics.
Contested logistics, to me, really means two things. One is your lines of communication are severed or they're severely degraded to the point that you are almost wholly reliant on what you have forward. The second is I would say it's logistics at the edge.
To maintain military readiness, the U.S. is pre-positioning stockpiles across Allied island chains and deploying 3D printers directly to the front lines to manufacture critical parts on demand. As competition with Beijing intensifies, the practice is giving Washington a direct line of trust with allies.
A new contender in the robotics race, one India-based robotics company says it has already built machines with a supply chain that relies very little or not at all on China. The FCC recently restricted imports of certain Chinese-made humanoid robots and advanced robotics equipment over national security concerns. That decision could create an opening for companies like ADI Robotics, which says many of its robots use fewer Chinese parts than competitors. The company's founder spoke with Wired about how the company built a more resilient supply chain by developing much of its own hardware. ADI's 10,000-pound tugger robot is nearly China-free, while its pallet mover uses less than 5% of Chinese components. The company says some parts can still be sourced from China, but note that they can still get replacement parts in countries like Japan, South Korea, Germany, and Taiwan, even if they cost more. ADI currently operates hundreds of robots in warehouses and factories and is preparing to launch its first humanoid robot later this year. It's also setting up a facility near Detroit to eventually assemble its robots in the U.S. The company says its approach shows robots can still compete on performance and price while reducing reliance on Chinese suppliers. A group of international lawmakers is pushing back against a new Chinese law they say threatens people beyond China's borders. The executive director of the Interparliamentary Alliance on China, known as IPAC, delivered a formal statement to Taiwan's president, Lai Ching-te.
IPAC is proud to comprise members who are leading the charge worldwide against transnational repression. This statement, negotiated by our network, expresses our rock-solid opposition to transnational repression, and especially the deeply troubling new ethnic unity law. We present it today as a symbol of our common struggle against authoritarian oppression and in solidarity with the Taiwanese people.
Taiwanese President Lai echoed that sentiment, calling on the international community to oppose what he described as China's red terror. The Chinese law in question has drawn widespread criticism. Opponents say its provisions enable Beijing to target ethnic Chinese people living abroad, including those in Taiwan. IPAC is comprised of more than 290 lawmakers from dozens of democratic nations. The alliance was established in 2020 out of a growing consensus that the Chinese Communist Party is becoming more authoritarian within China and increasingly assertive abroad. And turning to the Middle East, talks between the U.S. and Iran are on and off. Meanwhile, China's ties to Iran remain under the spotlight. To discuss the latest developments, NTD's Steve Lance speaks with Stefano Rittendale, Chief Intelligence Officer at Artorias and an Army veteran.
Now, Stefano, China has reverse engineered U.S. rifles, provided Iran the ability to manufacture them, among other things. How does the United States strategy towards Iran have to be sort of strategically aware of China's role in supporting the regime, also with dual-use components to support their missile manufacturing?
That's right. I mean, I think one of the key aspects of the Iranian ballistic missile program is wholeheartedly dependent on China. They've been one of the key conduits. Obviously, we saw that reports that China is going to sell manpads or short-range air defense systems to Iran to really target the United States and their ability there. And then obviously the Chinese, outside of just the military component, have always been one of the key economic backers of Iran. And I think the Achilles heels of Iran right now is their economy. And the naval blockade that the United States has imposed, the sanctions that are there, that's really caused the Iranian economy to stand at a halt. China's trying and is the most likely culprit to provide that lifeline to the Iranian regime. And I think the United States is going to be wise to look at the Chinese angle to try to see where and how they might support the Iranians. Now, it's also important to note that the Chinese are exposed in a lot of these sanctions, and they also don't want to necessarily run into a lot of these sanctions that the U.S. has imposed against Iran. And so they're going to be very cautious. And we know that China might take a step back if the United States takes a much more aggressive approach. It's important to note that in the naval blockade that the United States has announced against Iran, we haven't seen any attempts by any vessels, either even remotely associated with the Chinese government or Chinese businesses, try to run the blockade. So it does show that when the United States takes a forceful approach, it is effective in denying the Iranians their economic and military lifeline.
The U.S. boosting ties with Latin America. Secretary of State Marco Rubio met with Paraguay's vice president at the State Department on Tuesday. There, they signed an agreement on nuclear cooperation.
We've always had a strong connection between the United States and Paraguay. Those links have only grown strong. And agreements like this and others that I hope will happen in the future will begin to create, real concrete progress, institutionalize the deep ties between our two countries moving forward, so that they're not just a product of one administration or one era, but they become enduring and can survive the shifts in political winds that happen in democracies, and it's from time to time.
The agreement is part of a broader U.S. effort to strengthen alliances across Latin America and limit the influence of China and Russia in the region. Coming up, Taiwan under attack with